This is the On the Mark podcast, bringing you facts, opinions, and personal experiences from the outdoor industry.
I got the opportunity to shoot an AR-15. That was one of the funnest experiences that I've had.
It's pretty exciting. It's a big rush.
Presented by SightMark, an industry leader in optics, bore sights, night vision, and more. Make your mark.
That thing is getting dust all over it and riding on the ranch on that ATV, and there was a lot of wind yesterday and today, and it's just like the winds, you just see all this dust blowing. I'm like, oh.
That's a pretty good recommendation.
I don't know anything
it's
about
not
that.
anything that I don't think anybody makes them right
But you
now.
can pull it off real quick.
Yeah.
You've invited me out there, but all I've heard are words.
You've been on vacation, drinking beer.
I was working. Usually.
Welcome to the On the Mark podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hamilton. I have dual responsibilities here at Cellmark, and for a little while there, my other responsibilities required all of my attention. I had no extra time to devote to the podcast, but I'm happy to announce we're getting back into it. To kick things back off, I got Christian Wolbers here with us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Over here, I got Kevin Reese. He's our in-house media. What even do you do here, actually? I know you write stuff.
Nothing. Clean the bathrooms. That's what I do.
My
job is to network and make friends with people, build relationships. I handle media relations. Thank you very
media
much.
relations handler. That's Kevin Reese over there. He's in the corner. He'll be joining us as well. Couple of things to kind of get us rolling. I got to give a couple of shout outs. First one is to SightMark. SightMark's the sponsor of this show. They're the ones that make this all happen. This is the official show for SightMarks, the On the Mark podcast. So we're always happy to talk SightMark products and stuff like that on this show. However, it's not a product push, so we're not going to be diving into a lot of that type of stuff. We'll mention them here and there, but really we want to talk about life experiences and good times, which is why we brought Christian in, because he's done a lot of those type of things. The next shout out I got to do is for Timber Creek Outdoors. You might notice here in the middle of the table, I've got the Timber Creek Outdoors rifle here. They donated the hardware to this rifle. It was then installed by Mr. Kevin Reese. He's also the hardware installer, the custom gun builder. If you
Jack
wanna,
of all trades, master of none.
he can do a little bit of everything, not a lot of anything. Timber Creek Outdoors, they provide kits for your rifles. So if you guys want to deck out some of your rifles, they got all kinds of kits that could get you set up there in that aspect. So from there, we're just going to kind of roll right into things. On this day in 2002, somebody was introduced to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Who was it?
2002?
2002, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Ramones.
Ah.
The Ramones on 2002 on this day were introduced into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's significant only because Christian here is a world-renowned bass player. Is that right?
Yeah.
He also shreds on guitar. I've seen videos.
And
Play guitar as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, tell us a little bit more about you. How did you grow up? How did you get into music?
Well, I grew up in Europe, in a city called Antwerp in Belgium.
Okay.
Which is about 30 miles north from Brussels and about 10, 15 miles from the Dutch border. So I grew up in the Flemish part of Belgium, up north, and my dad was from Holland. And my dad was really into hunting. My godfather was a big shot at FN, Herstal, in Belgium, and my other uncle worked for Browning Hunting.
Oh, wow.
In Belgium. So, I had other uncles that would get all these toys from all these companies, and so I was around a lot of guns, and my dad had them just sitting wall to wall, and hanging on the wall, and I go in that room once in a while, and my dad always told me, like, don't touch anything.
Right.
And to teach me a lesson, he loaded everything up, safety's off, so all I had to do was pull the trigger. And my uncle told him, like, you're crazy. He's going to shoot himself. He goes, oh, well, he's going to learn a lesson the hard way, but he's going to learn that lesson. And sure enough, there was a rifle sitting in that room, which he made a custom silencer for, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what caliber it was, but it stuck out beyond everything in the room.
Yeah.
And there were some heavy calibers in that room.
Yeah.
And this thing stuck out this high above everything else. So I picked that one up because that can was about it looked enormous on that rifle.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't know, but it was a 22. And I put that thing on my lap, and I'm sitting there looking at it, whoa. And I'm like 12,
Yeah.
you know, like dumb as shit. And I pull the trigger on that, and it goes, zoom. And I'm like, what? I couldn't even tell if it went off, but I shot pellet rifles before.
Yeah.
And it was kind of similar.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. And I started searching the ground, and I see like sure enough, a little 22 shell.
Oh, no.
And I pick it up, and it's warm, and I'm like, oh, that came out of that rifle. And I look at the door, the bedroom door, and I see a little light beaming through from the hallway window that was behind it. Oh, man. And I was like, I'm done. My dad's going to beat me to shits because this. So I took that rifle into the backyard, unloaded it, and put it back.
Like, I might as well.
And I think he was, and I know for a fact he knew what happened. Like,
Yeah.
I covered up that hole in the door with like wood paint and all that shit. So
Yeah.
he didn't notice that. But I think he noticed at one point that his rifle was unloaded.
Yeah.
Maybe to a point where he was like, did I load it? Maybe I confused him so much because I never got a beating for that. And I would have got it would have been on a dinner table one night. Boom, there it comes. You know what I mean? That's how my dad was.
Yeah.
And I never got punished for that. So he probably got so confused. Like, there's no way he picked out that rifle and unloaded it. You know what I mean? He was probably like super, super confused. And
Yeah.
it probably still bothers him to this day.
Yeah, that's the last time you touched it, right?
That was, I never touched anything else because I knew whatever else I was going to pick up in that room was going to be a bigger hole in that door.
Yeah. You got off lucky with that being a 22.
I got lucky. I
Yeah.
got lucky.
Oh,
Thanks for
man.
that big ass can on the top of it.
Yeah.
Kevin, got all your guns loaded up, ready for your kids to play with them?
Why you ask so many questions, Copper?
We do not condone that, but
No, this
that
is
is
an
an
interesting
interesting
story.
way to teach your kids.
Yeah, this is
like-
1984
yeah, there you go.
in
Well-
Belgium.
Yes.
Hey, what are you gonna do? I mean, I love John Wayne movies and Clint Eastwood movies, and my mom, that's all she watched, all those spaghetti westerns. And as soon as I watch one of those movies, my mom, I go outside and I'm playing my little toy revolvers or whatever. And you got all these big toys sitting upstairs in a room. And the house that I grew up in was not a conventional house. I grew up in a beer factory
Yeah.
that was being converted to a home, and it was all over the place, and a lot of the stuff you could just break into and walk into, really. And I was in a small city, so my dad, one time we were at my uncle's getting drunk after my boarding school, because I went to boarding school. And Friday night, my dad picked me up, takes me to my uncle's house. He gets drunk over there, and right before we were about to leave, he goes, "Get up, we're leaving." And he goes, "I got a M16 and a Colt 45 right by your bed." And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? What? I didn't I heard it, but I didn't ask questions because he was drunk, and I know he can get. So we get home, and I walk in my room, and there's an M16 sitting next to my bed, and a holster, like old Western style holster with a Colt 45 single action revolver in it, and all the Colt 45 long Colts in the belt. And I was like, what the fuck? And he never really said anything about it. He goes, "I just got to store this right here." But he put it in my room. He could put it in his room right next door. But he put it in my room. I never understood why. But I remember that M16 had bipod on it, I think. And I was laying with that thing on my bed, looking through it into a mirror, it was like the best toy I ever had. And I never racked it. I didn't even knew how to pull the magazine, I don't think. I never looked into it if it was loaded. And I never tried to. But the only thing I ever tried to put around the chamber at my dad's house was when I found a SS Luger,
Yeah.
9mm Luger from an SS officer that my dad had won in a card game from my mom's uncle that had it. And I had the engravings of the SS and everything in it. And my dad won it in a card game, and he had it under his pillow. And I tried to rack that thing when I was a kid one time. I couldn't get one in the chamber because that goes kind of up like that.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom's uncle calling my dad one time in the morning, and my dad's sitting there after he got wasted one night, and he goes, "Nope, I'm not giving it back." And he hung up, and then he was like, "Fuck you, asshole." He was like, and I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Okay." And then I found out the story that he was trying to get the pistol back from my dad because they lost it. They were all drunk and he lost in a card game. He's like, no, I'm not giving that thing back.
Yeah.
You lost that. And I remember he kept calling. My dad just kept ignoring it and called him an asshole.
That's why he was hiding guns in your room. He was getting them away from all his other stash.
I think his story was that he had a friend that was a collector and he was moving and he needed to store it for a while.
Yeah.
Later on in life, like when I was like, really living in the States for about 20 years, my mom finally came out of the woodwork and told me that, oh, your dad was a smuggler. I'm like, what? Wait, what? On tour sometime with all my friends, and she kind of like finally dropped the bomb. I'm like, a smuggler? And it all started making sense. You know when like your mom tells you something in life and then all the puzzles just kind of it's completed, that last piece to where you like see the picture. Yeah. And the picture was there was a secret room in our factory that my dad had locked with a steel door on it, and there was all kinds of toys in there. Yeah. But Antwerp is a haven, a port, so he hung out with a lot of shady mafioso type of dudes that were getting things from. My mom. Every time my dad was drunk and my mom was pissed at him, he'd come home with some new type of appliance, like it was The Sopranos, you know what I mean? Like straight off the back of the truck. And we had everything. We had a microwave when they first came out, and I was like, my mom was the happiest in the world. My dad could have done anything, could have cheated, and he was forgiven because my mom had microwaves, dishwashers, everything, So,
extras in the garage.
So my dad was shady as hell, And I realized that later on in life when, my dad was driving a car from Holland to Belgium with a double bottom. Coffee, cigarettes, tax-free. The tax-free thing back in those days in the 60s and 70s was a big thing.
Right. My life sucked, man. My papa was doing sheet metal.
Well, my dad was an electrician, but he would never go. He would go to work at 2 p.m. And I go, why is he going to work at 2? He works for himself, but he goes to work, does like 3 things. He worked in this diamond district in Antwerp a lot for a lot of like really rich Jewish diamond dealers, And they loved him over there. He had the keys to all those shops and everything, and there was a bar, and that bar was definitely a mafia type of bar where, and he probably had a lot of connections and doing a lot of shady shit that I didn't really know about,
So how do you go from mafia smuggler extraordinaire life to musician? When did that transition take place?
I never participated in any of his dealings.
Sure.
But I think it was skateboarding. I started going to this roller rink in the outskirts of Antwerp, and that was around the time when all the hormones are kicking in and the girls are looking good, and you're 14, 15 years old, and there was this half pipe in that roller ring, and there was a bunch of skaters hanging on. They looked like all American clothing, fans, all the surf skateboard wear from like the early 80s. And I started watching those guys all the time. Became friends with them, started skateboarding. With skateboarding, a lot of music came associated with it. And one of those, the very first Paul Peralta Bones Brigade show was the first skateboard movie that really came out in 1984 that was the modern skateboarding introducing, and there was a lot of music involved with that, which really I started listening to because I saw it in these films. Yeah. And a lot of these bands were super cool, and then wanted to pick up a guitar, and that's kind of how, picking up a guitar was not easy. I didn't really have anybody to show me. I didn't have no brothers or sisters, so I learned everything on my own, and discovering music was all basically through that skateboard scene, which was a group of people, and everybody had their own things, niches that they were into, and you were picking off of those, and somebody loved a cult, and somebody was listening to NWA, and it was hardcore Suicidal Tendencies and all these bands. And, music really, once I started learning in music that, being on stage and seeing bands, and we're like, wow, that imagine that feeling of being on stage. And it was always that search for that feeling, I guess. And then you start playing in bands, and it starts happening. We're opening up for this band. Whoa, opening up for some of your bands that you were listening to. Yeah. That's kind of like the first, like, wow, we made it. We opened up for DRI or something, And then basically, like later on, I was like, I want to take this trip to the U.S. and go check out some American bands and the scene, and go buy a bunch of cool clothes and come back, Yeah. That type of thing. and I never came back.
You're one of them.
One of them. I started hanging out in Venice, California, and hung out with one of my favorite bands, a band called Beowulf, which was a hardcore band. And then from then, I ended up in Hollywood, bumped into a band that I was already friends with called Biohazard, a hardcore metal band. And then they introduced me to Fear Factory. They were like, you should be in Fear Factory. I was like, what? I go, I heard of that band. They go, they're going to go on tour with Sepultura soon, and they need a bass player. And they introduced me, sent me on my way with a bass to try out. Yeah. And that was it. The rest is history.
Nice.
I ended up in Fear Factory, and I mean, pretty much touring straight for 15 years, like nonstop, doing records, Fear tours, doing a new record, which takes 6 months to a year. So there was periods during my touring cycles where there was one period in a 2-year span where I was only home for almost a little over 2 weeks.
Wow. Yeah.
So every time you come home, it's like a vacation. You get to be home one day and it's like gone again. See your animals and you're gone again for like 2 months or something.
Is that would you say that's the hardest part about being a musician, is just being able to accept
that
you're always going to be on the road?
It depends on your personality.
Yeah.
Some people are just not cut out for it,
Right.
Some people come home from serving and they're like, why am I home? I should be out there doing this. They can't stay home. Yeah. Some people same from the music. Some people come home and they're like, why am I home? I need to be on tour.
Right.
But it's different when you have families and kids and stuff like that. But I didn't have kids. I was married, but I didn't have kids, so I just had dogs. Yeah. So it was a lot easier.
That was my deal, because I thought for a while that I wanted to get into music, and then I learned early on. I was like, man, I just don't want to travel that much. So
yeah, you gotta love the travel, and being in the traveling part is not always glamorous. Once you get a little bigger and you finally get your own bus, not your own bus. You're sharing a bus with a crew and the band. You're not driving in a van. You're making a move from a van into actually a bus, and it's usually not the nicest bus. When you're making the move from van to bus, it's the cheapest bus out of the entire fleet of all those companies that are in the U.S. Oh, this bus company, they're only like $300 a day. Yeah. And then it's a bus, and then you learn like, oh yeah, that used to be Willie Nelson's bus, or you know what I mean? Or there was all this history, and they were called 10 Eagles in the 70s. That was like the newest bus, and like in the Leonard Skinner. When you see all those old videos, those are those Eagles.
It's like the Partridge Family bus, except maybe not the multicolor, but basically a school bus with racks in it, or what?
There was some of those, but then the cheaper 10s are they look very RV-ish on the inside. Yeah. And everything squeaks and makes noise, and some of these colors are hideous, like banana. There was one banana yellow, and every time you pull into there's Fear Factory in their banana boat. It's like.
But no, my actual issue was I own 2 guitars, and I can only play one riff to Californication, and that's it. That's the only thing I know how to play.
That's like when you shoot your bow, right? I mean, you have a bow. Hey, I was talking. I have another friend of mine that is a lifetime musician, and so they record a lot and they tour a lot. And I was talking to him a while back because Christian knows. I spent 8 years in the Marines, and so you come and you go. And so I was talking to my other buddy about this exact thing and how similar the professional musician lifestyle is to the military lifestyle. Yeah. The sacrifice for your family is essentially the same, right? You're writing checks to different people, but
the time spent away is exactly the same.
He's home for 2 weeks out of a year, and when you go out, when you deploy, or you get orders to a duty station overseas. For me, Okinawa, when you come back, I was gone for a year, and I saw my family for 2 weeks. So the sacrifice is the same, man. That's a hard life.
Yeah.
Japan is awesome, though, to be.
No regrets, though.
My problem was too, like in that business, you get girls thrown at you every night too. So
hard to maintain a relationship.
Are you being good on the road? Are there any chicks around? It's like if you're married or something, like
her story.
You gotta have because depending on what type of band that you're in, some bands are super like not only huge, but they attract the female audience a lot better and bigger than my band, we're like, you know, we looked into the crowd. It was like
nothing but dudes here.
dude, it was so funny. Like our tech would come on the bus, like, "Hey guys, an hour before you guys go on, how's it look out there?" You know, that's that question you throw out. So how's it look out there? Oh, terrible. And he's just looking. It's just like, you know. But if you're, and then I used to go on tour with like Cypress Hill, or like, and we opened for Eminem and bands like and people like that. And you look into the crowd, you're like, oh my God, take me out of here. Get me out of here. You know, because it's all beautiful women. It's like, oh my God. So imagine if you're in like, you know, Backstreet Boys or any of those boy type of bands. And they're just screaming and crying.
Yeah.
You know, I was in a metal band with ugly dudes, so yeah. We didn't get much luck in that.
That doesn't
Once
help,
in a great
unless
while.
you're Aerosmith, right?
Yeah. And usually if you see
kind of a
our
train
type
wreck.
of shows, if there is any hot women out there, they're with 5 guys protecting them. If you even look at them, she's married. Sorry, just enjoying the scenery here.
Well, so one of the things that I was looking at when you had reached out to us originally, what was that, 2 months ago or so, and we're just kind of looking into, you know, maybe looking at some of our products and maybe coming up with a partnership. I started looking into some of your profiles a little bit, and one thing that caught my eye, because not on the music side of things, more on the I'm a backwoods redneck, grew up in the sticks side of things, is all these photos with you and these giant carp.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? Because it seems like a trend. This seems like a pretty big hobby of yours.
It's well, I'm European, so I grew up in Belgium, and bass fishing it's people do it over there. They, you know, they use a spinner and stuff like that. Not really from boats, from the side of shore, but it's not a huge sport fish out there. In the States, bass fishing is huge, right? In Europe, carp is considered a huge sport fish.
Really?
Yeah. The industry for carp fishing in Europe and Eastern Europe and England, where a lot of the companies come from, there's a lot of European companies, but the strongest big hole companies are all England. And it's a $10 billion industry.
Wow.
It's massive. All the gear, it's almost like the shooting industry. I mean, the detail to everything is so intense, with even a chair to sit in on the side of the lake for fishing. That chair is camo, it's got padding on it, it's got a carp logo on it. I mean, everything is made especially for that sport, and there's a lot of money being thrown at it. And some of the conventions for that sport in Europe are massive, with like hundreds of thousands of people going to these shows.
Wow.
So I grew up on it ever since I was like 12, 13 years old. I've been doing it in Europe, and catching some of these fish in Europe. Some of these fish were planted in some of these lakes right after World War II.
Wow.
And this is 1982, 83, and I'm catching these fish, and you know, not really realizing how old these fish are. Somebody put them like after World War II, maybe like the early 50s even.
Yeah.
So these fish, they grow old, they grow big. They're, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, it's carp. Oh, they destroyed the infrastructure of bass fishing, and they're blah, blah, blah. All fish eat eggs, okay? Caviar of ocean or the freshwater caviar, it's the eggs that fish spawn out. All fish, turtles, catfish, everybody grubs on that stuff. And it's like the caviar of the freshwater. Right. And, you know, there's a lot of other, there's a lot of other species that are way more harmful to bass eggs, if that's what they're worried about, which are crappie and all those other fish. They're way more aggressive. Bluegill, actually. Bluegill is way more aggressive and will kill any bass egg if it sees. A carp is actually good for, well, we're talking about the domestic type of carp. Now, if we're talking about silver carp, this is where people don't have education. Right. They think, oh, they heard the word carp, and they hear the stories about the bass industry being pulverized by these fish. Yeah. And it's not true, because carp are actually way more good. They're good for your pond. They're good for fertilizer. There's people that grow and they have koi swimming in between the plants and stuff. They fertilize really well, and they're They dig up the bottom for a lot of worms and stuff like that, bloodworm beds and stuff like that, where other fish now are able to eat from, because carp and catfish to me is actually the nuisance fish.
Yeah.
If I catch a catfish, I won't even touch it with my bare hands. I put gloves on and I'm like, get out of here. I think it's the most disgusting fish on the planet. And even though I fish, and I will hold a big ass 20, 30, 40, 50 pound carp, and I will kiss that thing and I'll cuddle it and hang out with it in the water and like let it swim off, like, you know what I mean? But a catfish, I will kick that fucker back into the lake.
I eat the crap out of catfish, man.
I mean, a lot of times when I fish Texas and stuff, I keep all the catfish that I catch.
Yeah.
And I'll give it to one of the locals. Hey, you guys want catfish? Right. Oh, hell yeah. You got some? And they'll look at me. 30 of them?
You get
like,
that away?
really?
Yeah.
You don't want them? I'm like, no, please take them. Oh, that's some good eating. You know what I mean?
Now, the flip side of that is, do you ever eat the carp?
Never. We don't kill them. And, you know, when you're in Europe, imagine if you're on one of those lakes in Europe, all the lakes in Europe, they're all protected with these anglers. They're almost like in the hunting industry. Like, imagine if there's like the perfect hunting ground somewhere. People are going to try to preserve that. They're not going to let people like kill all those animals. They're going to make sure there's always animals, and to keep, you know, harvesting new animals and stuff. In carp fishing, you're putting them back. You want the fellow angler to catch, you know, there's a 40, 50 pound carp that's been around for 30, 40 years. Some of these fish in Europe have names. Yeah. You know, and they're actually famous. If somebody catches one of these famous fish out of a very famous lake that's been around for 1,000 years in England, and that carp was 50 pounds, and it's the first English 50, you're on the front cover of the biggest magazines in fishing and all over Europe and England, and all of a sudden your fame is getting sponsored by companies and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Imagine if I shot a 500-pound boar tomorrow.
Right.
With, you know, my sig mark and stuff, and I take a picture. I mean, we can have a field day with that picture, because that's a giant. Oh my God, look at the map. And it's kind of like in carp fishing too. Like, you'll see guys with fish 80, 90, 100 pounds, man, and they're like, they can't even lift them out of the water. Yeah. And there's also a sport in you know, like Thailand, which is the Siamese carp, and they're massive 300, 400, 500 pounders. Really? Yeah, and three people, you got to lift them out of their Siamese carp, and it's all part of the carp family, which is the koi family. Yeah. So it's a huge sport. And when you hook one of those, even if you're out here in the lake and you're catching a 15, 20 pounder, which for me is like, I don't even take pictures of that. I take pictures anything above 30. Yeah. So if you catch one right here, your rod is going out. You're just like, zzz, and you're like, you know what I mean? You're not just pulling that, yanking it in, kind of like how bass fishing. You're like, oh, you're trying to, your hook hold, and you don't want to lose that fish, and you're pulling that thing as quick on the deck as you can. Yeah. In carp fishing, that fight will last sometimes 30, 35, 50 minutes. Damn. And that part right there, it's like that thrill. Yeah. And then when you get that thing in the net and you look at it, you're like, oh my God. And people look like, what? That lives in here? And you're like, yup. That feeling is amazing.
So if I was puttering around a lake in Europe with like 10 of those in a cooler,
oh my God, they will kill you. You'll get killed. Yeah. No, they will. Because some of these anglers, carp anglers in Europe, they're part of mafias, all kinds of. There's people that love that sport. Yeah. And they come from all terrains of life. Yeah. And I've heard the carp stories of these anglers that have been around since the 60s and the 70s, doing that basically built the sport to what it is today. The stories of these guys, I know some of these guys, and the stories, they are like war stories. You'll sit in the bar and they're telling stories about these fishing stories about them and things that happen at the lake that you're just like, what? I mean, so crazy. The best stories, but these fish are protected. And public lakes too. There's locals that will burn down your car. If I showed up in Europe and I just started tossing my rigs into a lake right there, because I know and I've heard there's some 60 pounders swimming in there. And I just, okay, nobody here. I got my fishing license. I'm good. I'm legal. Yeah. I'm allowed to fish here. Yeah. And I just start fishing. You'll see cars pulling up.
Locals checking you out.
Locals checking you out. Then I was on at night. And then if I happen to a famous angler, which is a friend of mine. He's probably like one of the most noticeable anglers on Instagram. His name is Daryl Peck. He went fishing at a lake in France. And he knew the fish were way out of his reach. Yeah. So he started double spooling, they call it. Mm-hmm. You like put the line out so far and you row it back with a boat, or like motor it back with a boat until your spool is empty, 600 meters on it. You link it to another spool, put that spool on your reel, and you keep going. So you're fishing at 1,200 yards.
Wow.
So he was fishing behind this bar, the sandbar that he knew the fish were over there.
Yeah.
But you can't get it from it's like this crazy lake where you constantly have to move because all this swamp.
Yeah.
And you keep sinking away and the water keeps rising and going down. And he's out there for like 6 weeks fishing. And he's blanking for like 4 weeks. There's a film on YouTube about it. It's amazing. And then he starts catching them because he figures it out.
Yeah.
And when the locals realized, because they saw other anglers coming up taking pictures of him, which companies he worked with in England, to take all that footage for their social media and stuff, and he was catching 50s and 60s one after another and going like, yeah, I got him, because you got to find these fish.
Yeah.
The locals burned down their cars sitting in the parking lot
Holy
half a mile away,
smokes.
and they saw explosions in the distance. What's going on over there? I don't know. That's kind of where we're parked, isn't it? You know, and they got pictures in their cars, their passports, everything that was in it, torched down to the floor. The locals came, oh, really? You're fishing here? Bam! And lit that shit on fire, dude.
Oh, my
So it's like that out there. You can't just show up at a lake out there. You have to know people, be invited. And the public lakes are so protected by the locals that you're from out of town, they see that bivvy, we call them bivvies, those little tents. Yeah. And you know it's a carp angler, and you can tell by the setup because we use alarms on our rods. Yeah. So imagine an alarm sitting right here. So when the rod goes off, it just and then you wake up, you get out your sleeping bag, and it's a lifestyle. It's really cool. Yeah. And it's growing in America. There's one shop in the U.S. that I deal with called Big Carp Tackle, where everybody buys their carp fishing kit from. Sure. They got a distribution deal with all the European companies. And there's a lot of Europeans that move to America that love doing that sport, so they're looking for that thrill in the U.S. And in the U.S., there is some amazing fishing. The problem is in Europe, it's all overran. And all those English lakes, you have to buy tickets. And some of those lakes have amazing fish and legendary fish. If you catch a 30 or a 40 out of that lake, you're famous type of thing. You're like, you're the man. Yeah. And you're on a buzz for a year off of that. But you'll pay, those tickets might be $2,000 a week. Wow. To fish on that lake. It's that expensive, you know, and the waiting list, 10, 15 years. You're on a waiting list waiting for people to drop off. There's only like, let's say 40 tickets for that lake. That's and if you live in a certain region, now you got to drive 300-400 miles to be able to enjoy something you love doing. Yeah. No matter if it's fishing or hunting, it takes a lot of the joy out, you know? Yeah. So for me, moving from California to Texas was the best thing for fishing, and also for hunting and everything else. But for fishing, California, all these rules. You can only fish 2 rods. No baiting. They call it chumming over here, but we call it baiting up. Yeah. No baiting. You can't use a boat. Boat ramp. No public boat ramps. All these. Oh, no, you can't sleep at the lake at night. You got to get off. Sun's going down. You got to get out of here. All these rules. In Texas, you can fish 99 hooks. So if you have 99 rods, if you can handle all that rod, management, go ahead, fish 99 rods. Yeah. You can sleep in the lake as long as you want. They'll come and check up on you and see if you're still alive. If you're not eaten by the gator or something. But it's so lenient out here. You can bait up, use a boat. You can really enjoy the things that you love doing. And there's not that many states that still have that. That's and funny, especially for anything that comes with rifles and hunting. And
I think I might have some pretty strong European ties.
Yeah,
because we live on a little
Irish.
We live on a little part of the Brazos River here locally, and anytime somebody is down there in the river or whatever they're doing, whether it's just walking around fishing or in a boat or something like that, I'm right there on the bank of my property, just staring at them like, "Hey,
I'm gonna burn your truck down."
Hey, you know who that is? How the fuck they get down here?
Burn his truck.
That's why
there's a lot of vehicle parked anywhere.
But there's a lot of lakes like in Texas where people have been like doing like the bow fishing.
Oh yeah.
And people get really into it. But there's a lot of people around those lakes that don't like it because they use all the big lights. There's a lot of noise that comes with it. So when all these people that live on those lakes all gather up at the city and be like, we don't want that, it's gone.
So I was gonna say, Jeff and I like to fish for carp too. We're big carp anglers with bows.
So how do you feel about bow fishing? My guess is you're against it.
Yeah, I'm not for it. Okay. I mean, it's the problem is if you take those fish home and you cook them, or you use them as fertilizer, or you're doing something useful with
do
them.
something with them, yeah.
But if you leave it on the bank
A
to
lot
rot,
of people just dump them. Yeah.
you know, you dumping it. Yeah, in the carp fishing world, it doesn't really go over that well.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
It's not like it's not like I get it. I understand why people don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of people look at us going like, why are you killing all these hogs? Like people that I live with in California. I remember having a girlfriend. She was super hot girlfriend. I was like, I'm going to go hog hunting tomorrow. She goes, oh, hell, you're not. You know what I mean? No way you're not. I'm like, why not? I'm going to go shoot a hog with my buddy from Prime Ammunition. It was like, my buddy Jason, who's a SWAT team guy. He goes, go hog hunting with us. I'm like, yeah, I want to try that. And she goes, nope, no, you're not. Sure enough, I wasn't. It's like, a lot of people don't get it. Yeah, ex-girlfriend. A lot of people don't get it.
Explains a lot.
And then,
we need to take them bow fishing with us.
I don't think it'll go over well, Kevin.
I'll shoot all the catfish you want.
We'll get you hooked. We can't shoot catfish.
You can't shoot catfish in Texas anymore.
Hey,
you could a couple years ago.
I thought I was a rock star when I shot a 21-pound fish. I thought I was going to be on the cover of magazine.
He shot a 21-pound grassy carp.
Oh, grass carp, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, not my favorite carp. I like the ones that you really don't see a lot in America, which is the mirror carp. They're called mirrors. They have all these different. The regular carp that we know, that they look golden brown, kind of that white, that yellow gold, reddish fins, and they all have the small little scales. But the mirror carp have scales in places. Sometimes some they're called leather carp. Yeah. They have no scales. They're just blank.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
cool. There's mirrors. There's leathers. There is a carp called a linear carp, which is just a carp with one scale, one set of scales, a row just going all the middle of it from the head to the tail.
That's interesting.
With no scales on the top of the bottom, but just one row of scales.
Now, are any of these like genetically modified, or are they all natural species?
There is, so that's a big debate in England, because they have a lot of homegrown carp that came from England, a lot of European carp that are grown in Europe in a lot of these fisheries. There was stealing carp in between lakes, moving them from one lake to another in the night. There was all kinds of thievery going on in that industry, because that industry was making a lot of money. So people are like, oh, I can make a lot of money. I need 30 pounders in my lake. So people would buy tickets on my lake, and that guy would go steal them from some place where that was like protected by something. Yeah. So later on in life, people are like, hey, man, I think these fish came from over there. Investigations were done. People got arrested in that industry, like for doing moving fish around could cause severe damage to ecosystems, even if they're just friendly fish. If there is a thing called koi herpes. So when you're moving fish around, you got to make sure those fish were never exposed to that herpes.
Make sure they're clean.
And they're clean and stuff. So there's a lot of Israeli.
Kevin, you know all about that.
Yeah, Israeli carp.
Carry stuff around like luggage.
No, the herpes.
Yeah. Hey, let me.
That's not koi herpes. That's
because I feel a little defensive. So full disclosure.
That's eye herpes from looking through a scope.
Full disclosure, I only bow fished because Jeff talked me into it. It was a peer pressure thing, and so I literally have only bow fished maybe a couple hundred times for purely experimental reasons.
Right.
A couple hundred times.
Yeah.
And of those couple hundred times, he's shot 3 fish.
To me, it's just
it's a game of numbers.
I mean, in our sport, they're very the people really they're kind of like a protective thing to us. For me, it's especially when they're like 30, 40, 50 pounders, because those numbers are, if you get a fish in that range, it's rare. And then seeing one put an arrow through one of his head and just leave it on the side of the bank, knowing that many people in this country could have benefited building the sport by catching one of those fish and be able to show them in pictures, and it will grow our sport.
You compared it to hog hunting earlier, and I think there's an easier justification for hog hunting when the hunters can say, look, they are actively destroying.
Yeah. If those carp are destroying our rivers and our lakes, what people are saying they are. No, that's the Asian carp. That's a completely different species.
Right.
That's a sport, actually. If you're in a boat, but you have to be, you probably have to wear a helmet, because those things will fly you. They have these electromagnetic pulses that they put inside the water.
Oh, wow.
So they shoot 50,000 volts around the boat in the water. Wow. And as you're riding that boat, these fish are just jumping out of the water. And they look like these silver-looking tuna, actually. It doesn't even look like a carp.
Yeah.
It looks like a tuna that's a lot flatter in size, and they're long, and they're really stiff fish. And that's what an Asian carp is. They're like almost like a
So they catch them
steelhead.
with nets out of the air?
What do they call them? Steelheads or
Steelheads,
something like that. It's almost like something like that, like we're super invasive, because those are invasive in Florida, right?
So when they jump up, are they netting, or they catch them with
They
nets?
jump
or
up,
what?
and they have these nets on the side of the boats that they catch them. But there's people just like when they jump up, just shooting them out of the sky.
Oh.
It's like clay shooting the fish.
Man, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, they have them up in the Midwest too. There was a video circulating a long time ago where these people were bow fishing these. They call them the flying carp.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
an
I
I
Asian
think it
carp,
might have
yeah.
been Tiffany Lacoste.
Yeah, and they hit one in the
that
air.
Fish hit her in the face, and I think broke her nose or
Oh,
something.
crap.
Hell yeah,
Yeah,
because
I can't say for
'cause
certain
those
that it
fish
was
are
her,
like
but I think it
bone.
was, but anyway, a fish came out of the water
Yeah.
and smacked this woman right in the face.
they're like
That's
bone.
nuts.
These things.
That's
They're
nuts.
really, really tough fish.
Well, I got to transition us now back over to the hog hunting side of things.
Yeah.
So you didn't get to go when you were dating that girl from California.
No.
I'm guessing you've been since then. You finally got
Yeah.
a taste of night hunting at some point, didn't you?
I basically, I have been. And if I go outside that house at night, I'm on that ranch.
Yeah.
I'm on a 5,000 acre section that's part of a 30,000 acre property.
Yeah.
And as soon as I walk outside that house, I can come in contact with hogs or coyotes.
Yeah.
And it's every time when you're not taking that rifle out, you'll see some.
Right.
And everybody's laughing at me on the ranch, like, because I'm always strapped with a rifle on my chest, and I'm like, we're going to the front gate. Even if I'm just driving to the front gate, I'm taking my rifle.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been building over the last few weeks. One thing I got is an ATV.
Okay.
That was a great purchase. Came up with a 2020 Polaris that I saw on Craigslist for half of the price what the guy put into.
Sure. Yeah.
And I couldn't really, let that go. And so I got that. I've been hog hunting with my buddy Scott from Zeph Arms, Zeph Industries, and he wears a helmet like this with the full fusion setup.
Yeah.
Which is super expensive. We take we got the Rubicon, that's his, that he takes the front window down, we take the doors off, and I'm just sitting outside the Rubicon, just kind of like you're sitting in a helicopter.
Yeah.
And he drives with the helmet on, and he's just scanning everywhere, and he pulls over like, get out.
Yeah.
200 yards right up ahead, left side. And we get out and we set up and try to get him. But we just drive around that ranch all night, and he's got the helmet set up. So I started learning things, I got the trail 2 on my rifle, and I've been spotting with that. So I've been kind of basically sitting on the side, and I don't want to waste battery life too much either, because you're sitting there sometimes for a long time doing it, and you're going through modes or whatever, and you're wasting battery life. And the last thing I want to do is run out of battery by the time the action is there.
Sure, yeah.
So I've been in carp fishing. We use these battery packs,
Yeah.
and you can charge your laptop like 15 times with it. It's like
Really?
really cool battery packs. They're about this big, and I got the power cord, going into the trail, and I put it on power mode, so it's constantly charging.
There you go.
When I'm just, when I'm just looking and scanning.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it like that, and it's getting a lot better. I got to find a sling for the rifle, which I've never had a decent sling. So I put a sling on. I put that thing high on my chest, and it's a lot easier to to scan.
Yeah.
But that's definitely.
It's funny you talk about the helmet-mounted systems.
Yeah, that's how
and driving those.
And I was thinking, like, if I'm on my ATV and I had that, oh man, I'd be. And even if I just had a mono, you can still, because you're just rolling slow, and I got all the lights turned off. Thinking about blacking out the stopping lights in the back of my ATV. You could probably just ride and just kind of like scan like low, and march the road a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I've said from the beginning that this podcast was not going to be a sales pitch on product, but I am going to call out those products right there, which this is the monocular. So this is literally the same thing that's on that helmet right there.
Right.
It's the exact same thing. There's just 2 of them, and this is the first one on the market in its price point for digital night vision, right? So it's different than the trail. It's not thermal.
Yeah.
It's digital night vision. It runs off of IR lights, is what allows you to see at night. But freaking awesome little unit that we just came out with.
In hog hunting, you cannot have a mono or something, because if you're looking through that scope, it's actually better to go with something cheaper on top of your rifle and something more expensive that you're holding, because eventually you're going to be looking through this thing all night.
Yeah.
And only when the action goes down, you turn that on and you use it for 5, 10, 20 seconds. And this is, you're better off having a 640 in this or something really expensive in that, and save a little more money on a scope.
So those have a built-in IR light on them, which is pretty cool. But when you put it on a helmet, what we did, because Chris is running the cameras for the podcast. Chris and I and the other videographer we just went out to our ranch here, the Selmark Ranch, and we did an overnight shoot using that setup right there with them on the helmet, driving the ATV around at nighttime. And I'll tell you what the key is. You got to get some IR light bars if you're going to run it that way. Yeah, that's a game changer.
We had them on the headlights. Yeah, we had them on the Rubicon. Oh, and he goes, look through the helmet. And I looked through it. When he turned that light on,
dude,
it was like the biggest headlights ever.
Just like
and I turned it, and I looked, and there was nothing. I was like, whoa. Yeah, he had one of those 12-inch light bars that he put on the front.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he had the laser on his rifle as well. And I'm like, because I can't see him, and he'd be looking over there, and he goes, watch right there, and he just point the laser. Yeah. The hogs can't see the laser.
Right.
He can only see it through his night vision. Yeah. And I was like, wow, man, that technology is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's amazing.
And again, not a sales pitch, but I mean, one of the reasons we love that one is, I mean, it has a number of different features that I like. I mean, hands-free, and I can still record my stock. Yeah. I would say if you were to compare the digital night vision capability of that one, compared to generational night vision, you're probably talking maybe Gen 2 plus. Yeah. Detection range of say maybe upwards of 300 yards. Yeah. But you can video your stock and everything. But in my military world, PVS 14s when they first came on the scene were super expensive. Right. And actually they came on the scene after I was out, but I knew the price ranges. And even still today, you're talking like $2,500 all the way up to $8,000. I mean, it's a huge, a ridiculously high price range for the generational night vision, right? And these are, what, $700 a piece or so. Yeah.
How much are these?
And you can run the dual on the bridge, just like that setup right there. So it's a pretty sweet deal.
So that's the dual. So it's the same unit twice, basically.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's immersive. So even though they're two separate units, when you look through them, your brain is only picking up one device. Yep. It's like looking through a pair of binoculars. Yeah,
because the fusion setup, so you got to get used to that a little bit. You're like, hey,
yeah.
There's ways so you can look through both of them at the same time and get used to it. Sure.
So what, for you, when you first got into night hunting, what was your biggest obstacle to overcome? Like, what was the thing that you were most iffy about? And I'll tell you what mine was when I started, which was just figuring out like the distance on what it is I'm looking at. Because sometimes you look through those digital units and it might seem like they're like 40 yards away. In reality, they might be 120 yards away.
Part of that is you're starting out with a base magnification, right? Yeah. It's not a 1 power.
Right.
I mean, for me, it was not that, but I know what you're saying, and I can relate with that a little bit too. When I was looking at, I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, there's something out there right there. I'm like, is that a pig? Yeah. And then finally when it stuck his head up and it moved, I could tell it was not. It was an armadillo. Yeah. But just the distance, for some reason, it looks so big.
Made it look huge.
Made it look huge, even though the animal was so small. So at night, figuring out that depth and how big that animal really is in real life. Yeah. You gotta get used to that a little bit. Yeah, it's something you learn. You just gotta look through that scope constantly, so you learn how all those animals move at night and how they sit, and because they're usually eating and looking for stuff.
Well, at my place, we'll go out with either the thermals or the digital night vision, and I will spot an animal far away. We're talking maybe 600 yards plus. And some of these digital, you take a digital night vision with that Sniper Hog IR light right there, you can push that unit out to 600 yards easy. Oh, yeah. But I'll be able to see stuff out that far. And just like you said, after a little while of learning how these animals move and behave,
you can tell.
I can take somebody brand new out and look at something 100 or 600 yards away and tell them that's not a group of pigs, that's deer. Yeah. How do you know? That just looks like a blob.
Because some deer look like coyotes sometimes.
I know for sure. Like you can tell.
Watch for that skinny neck.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just these coyotes look on thermal or night vision, they start looking more like hyenas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the ears, the way they look, and they don't look like they don't look like that spiky coyote head.
Yeah.
You don't see that on camera unless you got really close up on night vision or something. But
Have you been getting good at calling in coyotes?
well, this is another thing now with the ATV, the guy had already put aftermarket speakers on it, Bluetooth speakers, which is great. But I was carrying. Basically, on the ranch. I take care of a bunch of goats.
Yeah.
And I had a bunch of new babies in the morning, and I picked one up, and it had all these little what do they call them? Those Texas stickers.
Oh,
those little gnarly little
the burrs,
with the spikes, with those spikes on it. They're super sharp. And this goat, I picked it up. I was like, I had all these stickers on the bottom, so I started pulling them off, and I was recording him, and he was just not happy, and he's like screaming, this little baby goat, and I'm recording him, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's a great collar, isn't it? So I went home in my studio, and I recorded all these baby goat sounds of them being in distress because I was holding him. He's like, wah! So I put it on my Pro Tools, cut all the noise in between out, made it, put more volume on the file, EQ'd it, made it all sound good, a little bit of reverb, just a hair of delay, just kind of like, make it sound really good. Made a file out of it, and I sent it to myself, and then played on my phone. Holy moly. And then I was talking to Hans from ETS.
Yeah.
From that channel, the Hog Hunting channel.
Yeah.
And
you said Hans?
Hans, right? Yeah.
It was Legacy Outfitters.
Legacy Outfitters, yeah.
And Hans East Texas, yeah. He's a good dude.
Yeah, I showed him, I sent him a little Instagram message, a little video of my Pro Tools session. I played him, you see the WAV file like that, and he goes, dude, you're onto something.
Yeah.
Are those the goats from your ranch? I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's genius. That's great.
Yeah.
And I go, I just put it on my Bluetooth, and then I just sit there, and I got into like shooting some more pigs, but one of these days when I know where the coyotes are at, because sometimes I go outside the house and you just hear them, like, hundreds of them, like just all packed up somewhere.
Yep.
And then I'll go out there and then put that thing up and just turn it on my Bluetooth on my speakers.
Oh, you gotta let us know how that turns out, because that sounds genius. They're probably used to trying to pick those goats off.
They have those expensive collars. They're $700.
Yeah.
Hey, well, how many acres is the place you're hunting?
It's a 30,000 acre, 28,000 acre property, and we're managing, our section is 5,000.
Okay, so I was asking because I just wanted you to know that your new best friend, Kevin, has a full-size, Fox Pro setup. If you ever want to employ that,
your
BFF has.
You're back now from all your vacationing you've been doing in Europe.
He murders carp. He's a carp murderer.
Hey, I just want you to know that when I was overseas, he was messaging me, not you. So,
when are you gonna be back, man?
Hey, you wouldn't have met him if it wasn't for me. So you're welcome.
That's true. We could share.
All right, we can set him. We can set him fight over Christian all day.
Don't fight it, man. Just let it.
I think.
Hey, I did want to tell you that we talked about this when we were visiting last time about the call that you made. Mm-hmm. I was telling you my buddy he recorded his newborn baby crying.
Oh my God! Yeah. It probably works.
His wife wasn't happy about it because he was capitalizing on an opportunity. He recorded this baby crying for like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it was a colicky. I don't know what it was, but it was crying.
Hillary Clinton showed up.
Dude, that guy has killed so many coyotes with his baby call.
Oh, really? That's nuts.
Because it sounds
like those animals. Politician showed up.
It's still a distressed sound, That baby crying. It sounds like it's
yeah.
It's the way those goats sound. I mean, some of those sounds that they're making.
Babies and goats. Yeah.
That's nuts. Well, we're running pretty close on time here, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and let you go. I appreciate you coming in.
It was fun having me in, man. Thank you so much.
That was some good conversation.
It's cool doing things with podcasts and stuff in the gun world. It's something that there's a lot of musicians that love firearms and love the sport and everything that comes with it, and hunting, and people like Ted Nugent are the most noticeable ones on the market. But there's a lot of other guys from Five Finger Death Punch, and there's a friend of mine, As I Lay Dying, I think, the singer Phil.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if that was his band, but Phil. There's a lot of guys that a lot of guys don't really are so open about it on
Right.
Instagram and stuff like that,
Sure.
because there's a lot of liberalism going on in music today.
Yeah, well, and you've
People
also,
that are very anti-gun.
They're probably also trying to figure out like how to maintain their base crowd.
Because you lose a lot of.
Yeah,
I've posted pictures of guns and stuff on my. If I start posting videos of me shooting hogs,
yeah.
I'm sure half of my followers would be like gone.
Yeah.
Because they probably think it's the most inhumane thing in the world.
Hey, I just wanted to ask you real quick because I know you and I bounce a lot on social media and stuff. I know you're still active with like power flow and violence and all that. So I just want to ask you, like, what are you doing now, man?
Well, I just dropped a record on March 4th. We dropped a new violence record. It's our first new music in 28 years.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
This is a band, a thrash metal band from the 80s that I grew up on idolizing when I still lived in Europe. So now playing with them is just kind of like surreal still, because they were like really my favorite band. Everybody's favorite band was Metallica.
Yeah.
Mine was like the most.
Mine.
Mine was the most least favorite out of that entire bunch out of the Bay Area, and so playing with them and playing with Powerflow with Sendok from Cypress Hill and Billy from Biohazard. We got a record dropping at the end of the year.
Yeah.
That's already been recorded, but we got to wait until Cypress Hill drops a record in between, I think. And we start touring in May. So our schedule starts in mid-May, and we have May and June. I think July I have off, but August and September I'll be in like South America and Europe in November and December. We're doing the Headbangers Ball Tour in Europe. So it's finally we're starting to get into these shows, and touring, and because we're not playing shows if they require for all vaccination cards and all these rules and regulations. We're not playing them.
I just came back from Europe, dude. You're lining out a lot of countries. It was pretty rough.
I'm getting
there.
a cough. No, it's gonna be cool, man. We're playing. We're gonna be playing Eastern Europe.
Going to Bulgaria.
I think my friends are the Deftones, band Deftones, and they got shows in the Ukraine and Russia.
Oh no,
No, that's a little awkward.
They're probably not going to go there. They were still thinking about going there. I'm like, come on, guys. There's a full-on war going on.
war.
You should probably cancel the rest of Europe for the summer, probably too, just in case, because,
Oh,
but
man.
that's one thing about a lot of musicians. They still think they can go play a show even in the middle of a war. Some bands actually will probably do it.
Well, we do have a place for that. It's called the USO. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Christian, how can if anybody's watching this and they want to follow you or anything like that, what are your social handles? How can they find you?
Easiest would probably be on Instagram, which is Christian Oldie Wolbers. So OLDEWOLBERS is my entire last name. And that's probably the one I'm most active on. I also just got on Truth.
Okay.
Handle Fear Factory. Simple.
Handle Fear Factory on Truth. Okay.
Those are the only two platforms I kind of care about. I don't really care about Twitter, even though I have an account. I never really go on it. I don't really care for it.
No.
And Facebook, I never really cared for it at all. Even though I have a page, but I always thought Facebook was junk, even when they started it.
Yeah.
MySpace was kind of cool back in the day.
Take me back to MySpace.
Well, that's because you like MySpace because it was like music based.
Yeah, and then everybody's like Facebook. I'm like, Facebook? Oh. And then I kind of tried it. I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah. You can't customize anything.
You can get in touch with people from high school. Yeah. What? No thanks.
They know my secrets.
I know.
All right. Well, I'm going to power it down here.
All right, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Kevin?
Thanks, dude.
Thanks for coming on, man. And thanks for keeping it PG.
Thanks for trusting me, man. See?
You did good.
I censored myself. Kept it low key.